I'm going to turn it over to you, Woody, and allow you to introduce yourself and get us started.
Thanks, Jessica. So you're admitting everybody. I don't have to worry about any of that, correct?
I got it. I'm handling the tech for today.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. All right. So just before you go, just on one tech thing, I just make sure I see 13 participants, but I only see 5 people across. But that's because people are still, you're admitting them one by one, basically. I should just stop thinking about it. I'll just let you take all that. Okay.
Yeah,
Right,
don't
good.
think about it.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Jessica. So hi there, everybody. We're all making the best of Zoom. That includes me, meaning I'm going to futz around a little bit because whoops, somebody needs to mute. Okay, good. So I am gonna start off with a 3.5-minute video, which should be an interesting challenge to share. I've never done like a share video thing before. We're gonna try it. I'll say more about that in a second, and then I'm gonna do a reading from my new book, and then we'll do Q&A. So just by way of introduction, I'm pretty sure I'll be the oldest person on this call. Don't give me any guff. And we're not checking birth certificates or anything. I see Susan Miller wants to give me guff, so I can just tell by her body language. Anyway, about 12 years ago, I wrote a book called Inquiries into the Nature of Slow Money, Investing as if Food, Farms, and Fertility Mattered. And this was, I took a year off after about 30 years of working in different arenas, from venture capital to philanthropy. And it was all kind of around what has since become known as impact investing. We had different names for it along the way: double bottom line, triple bottom line, socially responsible, all kinds of different names. But it was all basically the same thing: trying to integrate, fundamental social and environmental concerns into the investing process. So when I wrote the Slow Money book, that was my attempt to kind of pause and reflect on, I was basically driven by the question, why aren't we doing more? Like, what's stopping us? The us in that case, my last kind of quote, let's say real job before Slow Money started, I was running something called Investor Circle, which was a national angel network that at the time had a couple of hundred members. It is one of the oldest angel networks in the United States. And I don't know how we're counting it now, but it's over $200 million of investing in maybe 300 green, socially responsible companies of different kinds. And a heavy slug of that was organic food, although a lot of it was renewable energy, but there was also organic food in there. So I've already rambled on too much about all that, but I'll answer more questions about background or whatever. Just by way of saying, I've been around stuff for a long time, and then I wrote that book, and the Slow Money book sparked with a lot of people while I was writing it, and it turned into a small movement. And you'll see, if I'm able to share the screen properly in a minute, you will see a slide that says that over $80 million, over the last decade, over $80 million has gone to over 800 small farms and local food businesses through the Slow Money movement. Now, we can talk later about whether that seems like a lot or a little. In a way, it's a lot, and in a way, it's a pittance. So, it just kind of depends on which frame you're using. And so now I want to just go to the video now and just say that the video is part of our new push for our second decade of Slow Money. And I think rather than saying anything more about it, I'm just going to try to show it to you. I just showed it for the first time in public, meaning to a group of about 25 people in Boulder yesterday. So you're actually the second group to see it. And after I show it, I'll talk a little bit more about it, and then I'll do the reading. Okay, let's see if I'm going into screen share here. Let's see how ugly this process is. Oh, come on, now it's asking me for a password, which it didn't ask me for before. I can't believe this. Why is it enter your password? Okay, let's just see what happens. Didn't ask. Are you seeing? Okay, unable to use. Jessica, this is so funny because we did all this a minute ago and it worked fine. Okay, hang on. Somebody give me a thumb up or a thumb down. Are you seeing the video? Thumb up, good. Okay, I mean, I haven't started the video yet. Okay, so we're screen sharing and hopefully the audio, okay, good. This looks promising. All right, I'm gonna start the video now. If there's a problem, just wave at me and I can stop it. I'll start it again. It's 3.5 minutes. And I'm gonna minimize you guys so I can maximize the screen. Hang on one sec. Do that. Okay, good. Let me do this. All right, hopefully we're still good. I'm going to start right now. All right, now let's see if I can stop share. I see a smile or two. That means it played. correct? It played. You saw it. There was, I don't know what was going on with the sound. The sound was a little glitchy today, and I have no idea what that was, but it was kind of catching a few times, the music. All right. So hopefully what you were able to tell from that video is that we have just launched this new site, beetcoin.org. I hope you will all go check it out after the talk. And on the site, you will see all of the story behind that video, like what these groups are that are making 0% loans, how Beetcoin is going to work. And I think I'll leave, just in the interest of time, I'm not going to talk anymore about the actual work on the ground until after I do the reading. So I'm just going to shift gears and go to the reading. This is my third book. I told you about the first one. We don't have time to tell you about the second one, but this one, so you can see this, correct? Can you read it, or is it backwards? I can't tell, actually. It's backwards on my screen. So it says, AHA, Fake Trillions, Real Billions, Beetcoin, and the Great American Do-Over. And the subtitle is A Nurture Capitalist Notebook. And so this book, which is written in the format, it's kind of formatted as a kind of a notebook, is my effort to pull together everything that I have learned and that I think we as a community are learning from the first 10 years of slow money. So what you're going to hear in my reading is everything from very big philosophical and historical ideas down to recounts of conversations I've had with people along the way, and kind of everything in between that connects all of that. And it's meant just to be a kind of a holding place for the next phase of our conversation about food, money, and culture. So just ride with it. I'm doing excerpts that aren't connected. And so just kind of go along for the ride here, and then we'll have Q&A. I'm going to do a few sections from the prologue, and then I'm going to do chapter 1. Don't panic. I'm not reading the whole book. A little more at the beginning, then I'll jump ahead. Prologue. In 1970, Alvin Toffler wrote the bestseller Future Shock, heralding an era of unprecedented innovation and acceleration. We couldn't quite know how right he was, although the resonance of his message was ineluctable. Now, on the back end of 50 years of just that, unprecedented innovation and acceleration in every sphere of life, we are trying to find our way from the age of ones and zeros to whatever comes next. What comes after future shock? By the way, this is one of the horrible things about talking to a mostly younger audience. You weren't alive when this book came out. That stinks. So that book was a big bestseller. That's why I started with it. It like really captured the kind of zeitgeist of, let's say, the very young environmental movement. We just come out of the 60s with all the protesting and the war in Vietnam. I mean, technology and computers weren't even, they were barely even a thing. They weren't really a thing. And this guy still wrote about this age of change that was coming. It was going to be so fast that it was going to be disoriented. So it's just kind of I just wanted to amplify that a little bit. What comes after future shock? Shock of pandemic, shock of supply chain, climate shock, cyber shock, actual shock and virtual shock, shock of billions and trillions, shock of us and shock of them. Shock that after all that future shock, fear, hatred, and vilification are shockingly stubborn. We are called to a new era of pragmatism at the level of household, community, and bioregion, pushed by the immediacy of crisis and pulled by the long-term need for systemic change. We are called to a new era of peacemaking at the level of, well, that's where poetic possibility and lively seriousness come in. The place where sapience flirts not only with disaster, but also with philia. And you're going to hear about philia a few more times. So just hang in there. The arcs of population, consumerism, militarism, industrialism, urbanism, technological adventurism, racism, and economic growth are almost impossible to bend. At the level of institutions and systems, exceedingly difficult to bend. What if, in addition to efforts to bend the practically unbendable, I blew that line, at the level of institutions and systems, we were to put more effort into mending the eminently mendable at the level of food shed and watershed? What if, because I believe Thoreau said, it's better to move a pile of stones than solve a moral problem, although I cannot retrieve that citation, we were to decide that local investing could be as powerful as global protesting? What if we discovered ways to navigate back and forth between the trillions of dollars coursing through the global economy every day and the trillions of microorganisms in each handful of fertile soil? The thing is, we were shutting down long before the pandemic-induced shutdown. By the way, this prologue was written in April 2020. I forgot to mention that. It's important because the book was basically written by then, and then the pandemic hit. And so the prologue kind of reflected the pandemic more than the rest of the book. So we were shutting down long before the pandemic-induced shutdown. We were shutting down small towns. We were shutting down small farms. We were shutting down local newspapers. We were shutting down diversity. We were shutting down culture in the name of commerce. We were shutting down trust. We were shutting down home and hearth in favor of fast food. We were shutting down here in favor of everywhere and nowhere. We were shutting down the real in favor of the fake. Now may or may not be the moment to open up this part or that part of the economy, but it is definitely the moment to do what we can to begin making sure this time is different, which means opening our hearts and minds to a whole new vision of nurture, culture, and cultivation. The prologue ends with this. Those of us of a certain age were of a certain other age in the 60s and 70s, when think global, act local became a meme before we knew what memes were. Today, we're all getting our comeuppance from fires in the Amazon in Australia, from viruses, well, in California, obviously, and Colorado, from viruses of pandemic and populism, from Greta. There's a hole in our hearts and in the heart of capitalism and in the culture of consumerism and investorism. It's a hole of mythic proportions. It cannot be healed by ultra-fast trading or the empty calories of stale dogma, but it can be healed. Chapter 1. Don't panic, I'm not reading the whole book. Chapter 1. Aha. You don't have an aha moment. An aha moment has you. And we are all about to be had. About to be had by the greatest, humblest, noblest, messiest, most meaningful aha of all time. But not just yet. At this moment, we are being overwhelmed, bombarded, dumbfounded by virus and meme, ideology and tribal antipathy, assertion and allegation, fear-mongering and scapegoating, punditry and polarization, data and disinformation, fakery and wakery. Things are rough and tumble here as the world keeps heating up on the cusp of post-industrial and pre-whatever comes next. This is what it feels like in the run-up to an awakening worthy of the species that gave itself the name Homo sapiens. Told you there were some big philosophical ideas. Now here's a conversation. Quote, I love to plow. An angel investor and philanthropist with a lifelong interest in organic farming was relating a conversation he'd had with a farmer. The farmer had said, I love to plow. I love the feel of the tractor. I love the look of a freshly plowed field. I love everything about plowing. I could hear, this is my friend relating the conversation, I could hear in the farmer's voice how deep that feeling went. I was mulling this, given the role of no-till farming in the portfolio of today's organic farmer, when my friend completed his thought, gazing intently at me, knowing he was about to incite an aha. He said, "I love to make money. I love to invest. Investing is my plowing." Can we imagine no-till investing, a 21st century ethos of investing of a wholly different kind? It might go something like this. This is not about numbers, doing these numbers versus doing those numbers. Let me bring this, I never know where to put the book here. This is about reaffirming the primacy of words over the claims on our attention made by numbers. Reaffirming the primacy of relationships over the claims of transactions. Reaffirming the primacy of nutrition over the claims of cheap calories. Reaffirming the primacy of places over the claims of markets. Reaffirming the primacy of generations and seasons over the claims of milliseconds and algorithms. Reaffirming the primacy of putting back in over the claims of taking out. Adam Smith's invisible hand has been framing our views on free markets, manufacturing, and finance ever since The Wealth of Nations came out in 1776. We are ready for a new ethos of investing, maybe even a new myth. If that seems too philosophical, let's be quick to add that there is nothing more pragmatic than making low interest or 0% interest loans to local organic farmers and small food enterprises. There's nothing more down to earth than relocalizing meaningful portions of our food supply and supporting a new generation of family farms, particularly in the US, which was at its founding a nation of small farmers and where a mere century ago, more than a third of the population lived on farms. Today, the largest 65,300 farms generate more than half the country's farm revenue. And half of this in turn goes to several thousand mega farms. I have a little data in this next paragraph, just try to feel the gestalt of it. In 1900, 40 cents of every US consumer dollar, food dollar, went to the farmer. Let's pause on that one for a second, just make sure you get it in your head. So in 1900, 40 cents of every US consumer food dollar went to the farmer. Today, it is less than 10 cents. Some say it's closer to 5 cents now, with the rest going to intermediaries, processors, distributors, retailers, advertisers, etc. During roughly that same period, agriculture's share of GDP, meaning during the 20th century, agriculture's share of GDP dropped from 8% to 1%. Meanwhile, the financial sector has been roaring in the opposite direction. In 1882, the New York Stock Exchange reached daily trading volume of 1 million shares. That was 1882. In 1986, a little more than 100 years later, just call it 100 years, it passed 100 million shares. It went from 1 million to 100 million in a century. The 9 billion share mark was passed in 2008. So in the next 20 years, it went up another 100-fold. Sophisticated financial products have proliferated. The financial sector's share of total corporate profits rose from 10% in 1950 to 30% today, while peaking at 40% right before the crash in 2008. Along the way, the indigenous, the heirloom, the traditional, the artisan, the agrarian, the local, the regional, often even the familial and the personal, and along with them whole swaths of social fabric and vital elements of culture have been sacrificed in the name of economic growth, in the name of it's the economy stupid, otherwise known as the stupid economy, bringing us everything from artificial ingredients and artificial intelligence to driverless cars and farmerless farms. The ancient Greeks distinguished between several kinds of love. The two I learned about in school were eros, for erotic love, and agape for universal love or altruism. They had others as well, including philia for friendship and affection. E.O. Wilson's term biophilia is defined as the innate affection humans have for all living things. Wendell Berry's concept of affection ties us to one another and to the land. Yet, as surely as the value of a living tree is one thing and the price of a pallet of 2x4s another, economics has had a remarkably easy time, a distressingly easy time, trumping biophilia and affection. That's why small, diversified organic farms are so vital. They are repositories of radical affection, generating and regenerating working relationships between economics and ecology at a comprehensible scale. What they contribute to society goes far beyond the nutrient-dense food they produce and the carbon their soil sequesters. Small and mid-sized organic farmers are essential workers in the long emergency. Well, no longer as long as we once thought. Of climate change, toxics, fast food, the substitution of the lowest common denominator for the common good, fast money, and the spiritual crises of a culture that has cut itself off from the land, slicing and dicing the whole into myriad pieces. Just looking at the time, okay. I've been thinking about what you're saying, said someone in the audience at the 20th annual meeting of the Sustainable Farming Association of Minnesota. You're saying that I'd be getting a loan from my neighbors, but I don't like some of my neighbors. A wave of laughter swept through the room. You're right, I replied. Transactions are one thing, relationships another. A whole other layer of relationships have to be taken into account. It's going to seem difficult at the start. Hold on, how many of you are farming because it's easy? A much stronger wave of laughter. By the way, there were about 300 organic farmers in the audience, just to give you an idea of the scale of the interaction. I was keynoting at the 20th annual meeting. So I said, how many of you are farming because it's easy? There was another wave of laughter. Who told you investing was supposed to be easy? We have the results of easy investing all around us, strip malls and smokestacks in China and climate change. We're giving our money to people we don't know very well, so they can invest in things they don't understand very well, in places most of us will never visit. That's easy investing. The kind of investing we need, investing that connects us to one another in the places where we live, won't be easy at first. But the rewards of farming don't come fast or easy. It's all about those rewards. I just want to pause and say that little anecdote is my biggest single personal aha moment from the last 10 years of slow money. So just imagine, an interaction between hundreds of people. We're talking back and forth. And I found myself saying, we're giving our money to people we don't know very well, to invest in things they don't understand very well, in places most of us will never visit. And as soon as I said it, I just was like, oh my God, that's what I think is fucked up about everything with money. We're giving our money to strangers. They're doing things with it so that we can have some money when we retire or want to take a vacation or something. And anyway, I won't say more about it. That's a big aha moment for me. Let's keep going. I take from my bookshelf a small stack of books related to local food, including The Feeding Web by Joan Gussow, Rebuilding the Food Shed by Philip Ackerman Least, The Town That Food Saved by Ben Hewitt, A Garlic Testament by Stanley Crawford, and Financing Our Food Shed by Carol Pepe Hewitt. I go to my finance section and take The Battle for the Soul of Capitalism by John Bogle, The End of Wall Street by Roger Lowenstein, The Ascent of Money by Neil Ferguson, The Ecology of Commerce by Paul Hawken, and The White Paper by Satoshi Nakamoto, the imputed developer of Bitcoin. All of these touch on, albeit often quite indirectly, the violence of the modern economy. Not the military-industrial violence of armed aggression or oppression, but the kind of harm done when you try to substitute transactions for relationships. tattered social fabric, overtaxed natural systems, balance sheets out of whack from cheap profits, civility out of whack from cheap tweets, metabolisms out of whack from cheap calories. When I glance back at the bookcase, I notice Jihad versus McWorld by Benjamin Barber. That's a 1995 book. Just think about that for a second. 1995, someone wrote a book called Jihad versus McWorld. So I see that book and I realize once again, once again, for the umpteenth time, having forgotten or buried it umpteen times over the years, that what I find so meaningful, so beautiful about small organic farms and local food systems goes beyond agriculture, health, local economies, and climate change. What underpins all this for me, what feeds me, as surely as mycorrhizal fungi collude with the root hairs of a beet, is the impulse to do less harm, the impulse towards conviviality and collaboration and radical neighborliness, the impulse towards something that is the opposite of both Jihad and McWorld. Responding to this impulse begins with healing the ills of distance, anonymity, and transience that have alienated us from our life source, food. What's more peaceable than getting to know a local organic farmer and giving her a 0% loan? Peace is as abundant as soil and as easily eroded. We're getting there. Blockchain technology is hard for most of us to understand, which is a particular drawback when one of the things we need in an increasingly Orwellian world is clarity and transparency. It seems odd that something celebrated for ushering in a new age of financial trust and peer-to-peer networking would be the progeny of a person or persons whose identity is shrouded in secrecy. Extreme financial speculation on the one hand and irrationally exuberant techno-utopianism on the other plague Bitcoin, which is not entirely unlike the range of responses elicited by the prospect of Mars travel. We don't want the adventure of traveling to Mars to distract us from taking care of one another right here on Earth. We don't want the allure of cryptocurrency to distract us from the trust that is ours to build directly and locally. Now that we've demonstrated the sapience to head to Mars and to invent blockchain, we must also demonstrate the philia to invest our earthly inheritance with new levels of compassion, goodwill, and care. I'll see your Bitcoin and raise you Beetcoin. A non-crypto, non-currency, impervious to speculation and techno-utopianism and guaranteed to elicit affection. Online platforms for individual transactions, and actually for many of you on this call, I think this little paragraph might be important because it's kind of the rationale behind the activism rationale behind Bitcoin. Online platforms for individual transactions democratize finance, but do not address the systemic challenges of relocalization. Can we build a broad-based crowdfunding campaign to empower local food communities? Can we develop an online funding community that sees its purpose not as enabling individual transactions, but as feeding the local roots of systemic change? Two more excerpts here. How one understands the value of what local organic farmers are doing is the jumping off point for an exploration of nurture capital. It shapes our intention. If we view farmers as producers of commodities for global supply chains, we have one kind of financial intention. If we view farmers as stewards of soil fertility and producers of healthy food for our community, we have another kind of financial intention. This notebook and the slow money movement from which it springs, and the idea of nurture capital as a larger framework are all explorations of intention. We are not just losing or building soil carbon, we are losing or building intention. Economic growth and fast money erode intention. Over and over again, I've seen the intention of social enterprises, also called mission-driven companies, become diluted as ventures grow, as they dance with investors, as ownership changes, as founding visions are compromised by the imperatives of the marketplace, or get lost in a haze of entrepreneurial zeal, wealth creation, and absentee ownership. This is a story that has played itself out thousands of times, millions of times. It's a bit too much like salmon swimming out to the sea of absentee and public ownership, never to find their way back home. We talk of nutrient-dense food. Perhaps we should also talk about intention-dense entrepreneurship. A small, diversified organic farm is the most intention-dense of enterprises. The idea that a whole new sector of finance could emerge to respect the intention density of small local businesses, starting with food and farming, is an idea worth mulling. Bill Donaldson, former chairman and CEO of the New York Stock Exchange, once said during a conversation, "A portfolio is a portfolio is a portfolio." However strong the intention to splice social and environmental mission into the investment decision-making of a professional portfolio manager, the arithmetic of financial risk and return governs. How do we steer money not only in a new direction, but in a way that allows us to hold intention? Okay, the grand finale zooms way out. This is in the epilogue, so it zooms way out and then comes back in, and then we'll go to Q&A. 10,000 years ago, agriculture set us on the path towards urbanization, industrialization, and the geopolitics of nation states. 400 years ago, Europeans arrived on the shores of the New World and built the city of Providence, professing gratitude that the indigenous population was being wiped away as if by the hand of God. 250 years ago, our slave-holding founding fathers posited that all men are created equal. 100 years ago, internal combustion and ammonium nitrate began conspiring to make Spam, TV dinners, Cocoa Puffs, Big Macs, and Twinkies. 50 years ago, millions of Americans marched in hundreds of cities and towns on the first Earth Day. We need to pause on that one. I actually have the picture. Let me see if I might be able to fetch it here really fast. Okay, no, you can't really see that well. That's the front page of the New York Times from April 22nd, 1970. And it shows millions of people on Fifth Avenue, a larger crowd than any of the current marches, any of the Greta stuff. And that's not a knock on Greta at the least, it's a knock on us, it's a knock on the baby boomers. I mean, 50 years ago, tens of millions of people were marching in the United States on the first Earth Day, 50 years ago. Okay, those baby boomers, those few of us who are on this call, we can feel shame together. So that was 50 years ago. 25 years ago, Timothy McVeigh detonated 4,800 pounds of ammonium nitrate beside the Oklahoma City Federal Building. 10 years ago, the words Deepwater Horizon and BP oil spill became synonymous with environmental disaster. 10 days ago, now this was last year, so you just got to keep that in mind. 10 days ago, the Cameron Peak fire, Colorado's largest ever, was 92% contained at 208,913 acres or 326 square miles. 10 minutes ago, again last year, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was 29,444. 10 minutes from now, someone is going to go to Beetcoin.org and chip in $25. I don't hear you all rushing to your keyboards. 10 years from now, Greta will be 27 years of age. Parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere will be And what, pray tell, will be the percentage soil organic carbon at Soul Fire Farm? This is a story as small as a small farm, as brief as a decade, and as ripple-inducing as the inklings of the transition from Homo sapiens to homophilia. Thus endeth today's reading. So thank you all for your attention and letting me do that. It's a great pleasure to share what I've spent so much time writing. And the floor is now open for questions of any sort. It could be big theoretical questions or how Beatcoin works or anything in between, anything at all. Comments, questions.
I'm just going to recognize some love that you got in the chat, Woody. Christina says, Woody, you are a poet. And I want to thank you for sharing from your book, AHA. And where can we purchase that book? Where is your preferred method?
Thank you for asking. Yeah, there are 2 actions. And I know, you guys are all about action. We're all about action. So the 2 actions that we are hoping to spark and catalyze from all this, one is people buying the book. So at one end, and it's very important for me to add, the book is available free online.
Okay.
So if you go to beetcoin.org, actually I'll say there are 3 actions. First action, go to beetcoin.org and poke around the site. The video I showed you is embedded on one of the pages of the site. There's some other videos. There's a how it works page, of course, explaining all the ins and outs. It just gives you links to all the groups that are doing 0% loans and a whole bunch of other stuff. So please go to the site and just poke around. That's thing one. On the site, you can order the book. If you want to get this hard copy of the book, it's published by the Slow Money Institute. All the proceeds go into our NGO. You can order it you'll see a place to order it there. And it also says there, if you do not wish to purchase a hard copy, you can get it online for free right there, either in its entirety or any of the sections. What I learned in this process, we actually released the installments during COVID. About every several weeks, we put out one of the sections of the book. And I really didn't have plans to publish it as a book at that time. I just wanted to distribute it online because I don't really like being in the book selling, like trying to sell my book online. But it turned out a lot of people wanted the hard copy. So then we went through the thing. And the last action, I just say the third action is donate to Beetcoin, even if it's $5. The whole idea of Beetcoin, just to kind of, you didn't ask this, but I'm just going to take advantage to say it again. Slow Money has never had a strong online presence. Why is that? Partially because I'm a Luddite, a little bit. I say that to provoke a response. I mean, I'm not a Luddite. I have a plug-in hybrid. I have MacBook Airs. I fly sometimes, so I'm not an actual Luddite. But the Luddites were right, not necessarily in their actions, but in their fears that industrialization was going to displace everybody and create all kinds of long-term problems. So for someone who is a Wendell Berry devotee and has Luddite tendencies, doing a crowdfunding platform is not exactly where you would go first. So it took me a long time to wrap my head around how we might use the power of the internet to support what we're trying to do. And the reason we got there is because this idea of local groups that do 0% loans emerged during the course of the first decade of Slow Money. And so I'm hoping someone will ask me to say a little more. I'm going to stop it in a second here. But that whole idea of donating at the local level, making 0% loans by majority vote of the donating members, one person, one vote, no matter how much money you put in, you make the 0% loans. When they come back, they recirculate in the community. And the idea for Beetcoin is, what if we could drop some other money into the system from people scattered all over the world who only have $5 or $10 and just want to click and chip in. So I'll say more about all that if you want, but that's the basic idea. So there are 3 actions: a small donation to Beetcoin if you can afford it, the book if you're so inclined, and going to the Beetcoin website. And my personal hope is that the gestalt or the zeitgeist, whatever that's in the book, meaning the larger framework of all the ideas, will have cast a little bit of a kind of a halo effect on the small actions of the Beetcoin clickers. And hopefully we'll all work together to get something done. I mean, I want to see major change. The reason I riffed on the 1970 thing is not because there was anything great about 1970. It's because now it's 2021 and shame on us all that we haven't done more. And so this next decade, which I call the decade of Greta, I mean, I didn't, I'm not making that up, but I'm just saying, to me, we don't need more leadership. She's there. We need to follow her. And that means those of us who have some money, any amount of money from $5 to $5 million, need to put some of it to work locally in a much more radical way, starting with food. Okay, sorry for that whole riff. I'll try not to do that every time. I apologize.
You're a fountain of information, Woody. Thank you. So I have a contribution from Adam Hicks in the chat.
Yep.
Also, Kat has asked that folks who have questions, please use the raise your hand function or physically raise your hand and we'll get to you. So I'm going to read that. Aloha from Macau on the slopes of Haleakala on the island of Maui, and thank you for your work. 0% interest still means 100% of capital is returned, correct? Where can I find the spreadsheets that show ROI, return of investment? I'm managing a 70-acre farm for friends who have resources and are willing to be slow investors, but still need to see how the numbers run. They've asked me to generate operating costs out of revenue, but it takes time and funding to get there. I believe they have the spirit and we have the passion, but missing pragmatic puzzle pieces to put together. So we are not wasting time, money, and energy to get a self-sustaining operation. Any comments or guidance, books or organizations I can delve into would be appreciated. And of course,
Wow.
AHA.
Someone put all that in the chat?
Yes, they did. Thank you, Adam,
Wow.
for that.
Hey, dude, you got to write a book if you put all that in the chat. Well, again, in the interest of time, all I can say is we are taking one shot at a target. It's going to take lots of shots at maybe even lots of targets. But the basic idea is to create new ways for people to put as much of their money as they feel they can afford to work locally, starting with food and farming. So everybody doesn't have to do it exactly the way I'm saying we're doing it in Slow Money at the moment. But I can tell you what I think the virtues of our model are by getting a group of people together. Let's say you have 20 people, 40 people, 100 people. We have 115 people in Boulder, just to give one example. So let me actually say, just rather than say anything more theoretical, I'll just tell you what we're doing in Boulder. And you just hold this. Was his name Adam, did you say? So Adam, this is an indirect answer to your question. Just hold this as a way of doing something related to what you just said. Because you just asked, he basically asked, like we could have 5 hours of conversation and everything he just raised in that chat comment. Here's what we're doing in Boulder. We have 115 people who in this calendar year have given money to what we call SOIL, Slow Opportunities for Investing Locally. That's what we're calling these groups, SOIL groups. Everybody who donates, if $25 if you're a farmer, $250 if you're a non-farmer, up to whatever amount. The largest single check has been $50,000. We've raised over $500,000 since we started over in the last three plus years. We've lent out 300,000 of it in 19 loans, just to give you an idea of the scale. There are 0% loans. We make the decisions by one vote, one person, no matter how much money you put in. When the money gets repaid, it stays in the group. Every year we get new members, more money comes in the top, and we create this recirculating. It's like financial compost. That's how we think about it. It's long-term. Now, it's not perfect because nothing's perfect, right? Certainly nothing about money is perfect. It can never be perfect. So implicit in Adam's question is you have philanthropy on the one hand and impact investing on the other. And then in the middle, there's not much. And that's where we're trying to go. We're trying to go investing in some principles of philanthropy. The spirit of what we're doing is very much addressing what I understand Adam's comments to be. There are no real profits in small-scale diversified organic farming that can be given to investors. And if there were profits, they certainly shouldn't be given to investors. They should stay in the community. So that's the idea of the 0%. There's no financial return to the group. There are community returns galore. The money stays in and is relent out to other farmers in the future. So Adam, thank you for your question. It obviously, raises a zillion questions about investors and capitalism and investor return. The idea is to provide capital that is as patient as possible and in a way where all the returns stay in for the benefit of the soil and the future of the community. That's our idea. That's what we're trying to do.
Thanks, Woody. And we'll go to Mark Cooper next.
Hi, Woody. Two quick questions. I'd like to get your views, on how you see the placement of technology in this field. And that's very broad, but I'm thinking of more advantageous like hydroponics, aquaponics. And the second, if I'm understanding you right, you're 0% loans. There's no back end fees, which means you're an all volunteer organization. And so my question is, all volunteer organizations, can wobble. How do you view that? So those are
Okay,
the two.
let's take the second first. And you're almost correct, but not quite. Meaning, yes, at the beginning, it's all volunteer. So you get these groups together. It takes a few years to get a local soil group off. We have 5 groups now. Let me be clear on that too, just to give some context. There are 4 in Colorado, 1 in Virginia, that are explicitly organized to do the model I just said. Donations in, 0% loans out. And yes, they all start as pure volunteer organizations. One in the Roaring Fork Valley of Colorado now has a half-time paid staff person. And the one in Boulder, we had a staff person for 6 months and then stopped it because we think we did it a little too soon. It's like anything, we're feeling our way. The point is, because it's a nonprofit, you can decide at some point when you have enough hundreds of thousands of dollars in the kitty that you want to spend some money on a staff person. There's nothing to stop you, because no one's doing transaction costs the way you do in a for-profit investment fund. You could never do this as a for-profit because the cost of running the thing would dwarf any possible returns you would ever make by making a 3% loan or a 5% loan. So the assumption you made in your question that it was all volunteer was half right. It's all volunteer at the beginning. When the groups get big enough, they can decide to hire a staff person if they want. You have to think actually, and this will sound a little crazy, you have to think like a 25-year arc, really, because if they do this for a long enough time in the community, it will turn into a few $1 million, and then you will definitely be able to afford a full-time staff person along the way. But you got to last long enough to get there. So you're kind of right in the question. It's how do you make sure you last long enough? Now that's a perfect setup to get me to riff on Beetcoin again, which I'm not going to do, except to say that's one of the purposes of Beetcoin, which is to supplement the funds that can be raised locally with online campaign money to say, hey, we want to see hundreds of these groups all over the place. I live in the middle of nowhere. Here's my $20. Make it happen. And if we can aggregate enough small donations, we, the Slow Money Institute, will give them as matching grants to the local soil groups to help subsidize their startup and their growth. The whole idea is the groups have to get to the point where they address your concern, where there's enough money in there for them to be sustainable for the long term. I know I'm going kind of fast, but so that's my answer on that one. On the technology side, I don't really have an answer. There are groups in our sphere, one in particular called the Real Organic Project, which is an NGO, you can check them out, that are lobbying tooth and nail against the USDA's decision to allow hydroponics to be called, you mentioned hydroponics, that's why I'm going there, that are lobbying to try to reverse the USDA's narrowly decided ruling that hydroponics can be certified as organic. And then we have to get into like the whole thing about soil fertility and soil chemistry and nutrient dense food and what's wrong with hydroponics and whatever. But I would say the phrase appropriate technology, which like E.F. Schumacher kind of came up with when he wrote Small is Beautiful. I mean, the idea is not to be against technology, it's for appropriate uses of technology. I mean, we're on a technology right now, it's an appropriate use. So I don't have like a global answer on technology. If you want to prompt me with a more specific one, I guess I could say something else, but that's not an area that I tend to be about small, simple things because and I tend to be against over-reliance on technology. And the reason is I often use the invention of the car as my main stick to cudgel. If you're a technology level, I want to cudgel you with a car. Why? Because the car was invented at the turn of the last century to get manure off city streets. That was the problem the car was solving, not how do we go faster? Because at the beginning, horses were faster than cars, but it was get rid of the manure on city streets. And now 100 years later, we have carbon in the atmosphere, a way worse problem than the manure on the city streets was. So to me, that's more than enough cautionary tale about solving problems with technology that pushes other problems out. And eventually the problems come home to roost in even a worse form than, because we're solving little pieces of things and nature is a big thing. So the problems we solve tend to create other problems. You don't have to believe all that necessarily to think we're over relying on a few large technologically driven farms with monocultures and GMOs. We need to have more diversified small organic farms. To me, that you don't have to be like all one way or all the other. It's just about balance. Anyway, Mark, all good stuff, lots of issues there.
All right, let's go over to George.
Thank you, Woody. Very inspiring. One comment, since you're not into technology too much, it seems like maybe you need a front man to help you get this thing to go viral. A younger person.
Hey, watch it. Come on.
Yeah, and I was at Earth in 1970. I remember it well.
Yeah.
Question: how long does the typical loan take to get repaid back? How long does the money cycle through your system?
Yeah, no. So I'll answer that. Well, first I want to make the comment about needing the younger person. Absolutely. Are you kidding? Yeah, I have no desire to be, nor would I profess to be the entrepreneur who's going to grow Beetcoin. We've kind of queued it up, and now we're going out. We're going to be looking for people and dollars and all. So absolutely, yes to that. And as far as the loans are going, the way I'll tell you how we're doing it in Boulder. We don't tell each group and we don't tell them that. We don't tell them how many years we just say the 0% part. What we're doing in Boulder is we've kind of landed on 4 years, no payments until the end of the second year, at which time 20% is due, 30% at the end of the third year, and the other 50% at the end of the fourth year. So that works if you're doing a small loan. If you're doing like a $10,000 loan or $15,000, our largest loan is $30,000 so far. Obviously, if you start getting into larger loans, you can't have bullets at the end of 2, 3, and 4 years. That's not enough time. So the idea here is to get the money circulating in the community, show that the model is working, gradually have the loans become a little larger and longer term. But that's where we've started. It's an art form. I mean, we're inventing that as we go. So.
Right. Well, very inspiring. And then one last question. Have you met any resistance to your concept? I mean, either from the banking side or from the farming side?
No, everybody loves it.
Good.
No, I'm just, let's see, resistance. Well, okay, this is an indirect answer to your question, but it's one of my favorite anecdotes that is kind of almost implied in your question. So Oscar Wilde once said that the whole problem with socialism is that it requires too many evening meetings. Okay, now if I say that, which I just did, I always add, slow money is not socialism. It's a highly sociable form of capitalism, but it does require a lot of evening meetings. So part of the resistance is just the implied resistance of getting people to collaborate, think a new thing. But yeah, there's a lot of people, the first reaction is 0% loans. That doesn't make any sense. And I'm not sure if Adam's question, that long chat question, I couldn't quite grok to the whole thing, which part of the thing he was pushing on a little bit. But yeah, you can say 0%, that's like the worst of all possible worlds. It's still a loan, but it doesn't include transaction costs, and there's moral hazard in it. I mean, there's a lot of things you can object to it. And we hear a little bit of that from everybody. I mean, when people first hear the idea, they don't all just leap up in their seat and go, yes, let's go do that tomorrow. It takes a while for them to kind of sit with it. But what we are finding is it's kind of landing in a good place with a lot of people. It just takes a little time to kind of wrap your head around all the pieces of it. As far as bank, like your implied thing about professional resistance of some kind, or we haven't had any of that. So I'll just say no to that so far. Probably because we're just too small. No one's really noticed us yet. Maybe they don't, who knows what that is. And there was another part to your question. Oh, farmers. So a few farmers actually resist the idea of 0% loans on the ground that it's too concessionary, which is kind of a counterintuitive thing. They say, hey, we're a real business. We don't want charity. If we're going to take a loan, we want it to be a real loan. And so I've developed an answer to that over time, because I hear that every night. I said, okay, I'll tell you what, we'll give it to you with no interest, but if you want to pay interest back, you just give us some interest. but we're not requiring it. That usually stops that part of the conversation. So I hope that gives you a feel for some of the issues.
Very much. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your question and comment.
And Woody, I just want to check in with you. We have a couple more questions. Are you willing to stick with
Oh,
us?
absolutely. Yeah, of course. I'm here for as long as anybody wants to ask anything.
Thank you. So we have a question from Andrew about how do we start a soil group in our own community?
Again, this is why I'm trying to do the Beetcoin thing, because the hope is we'll have enough resources. If we can get something generated here, we will use these resources to build infrastructure to help these groups start all over the place. Right now, there's no easy answer. Right now, it's you would put me on a Zoom call with a handful of your friends who might want to do this. We would have a much more nuts and bolts conversation about the stuff we just talked about today. Then we do it again a month later. Then we do it again a month later. If COVID wasn't an issue or I was within driving distance, I would come and visit with you guys. My hope is a year from now, I'll have a few staff people who will assist me in doing this in lots of places. Because just like I'm not trying to be the Beetcoin entrepreneur, I'm not trying to be the guy to do all the soil groups either. I'm just trying to make this all happen somehow. So if you really do want to start a soil group, I ask him where he is. He can put it in the chat room where he is. I would obviously help you any way I could, but as an organization, Slow Money is like one step away from that, meaning we've just put this new Beetcoin site together, which is putting the idea of 0% loan groups and online funding out in the public domain as a one cohesive movement. And what I didn't say, which maybe is obvious or implied strongly, is that large donors, professional philanthropists, have not tended to see what we're doing as radical enough, politically correct enough. It's too white, it's too spotty, it's in affluent zip codes. It's never going to scale up because it's too fragmented. And by the way, there's some merit to every one of those points, but it misses the larger point, which is this is radical social change. This is people coming together at the community level to share risk, put carbon back in the soil, and build their local food system. It's a totally different way to think about all that. And of course, the goal is to get it into as many communities and as diverse populations as possible over time. And if you do go to the beetcoin.org site, I apologize. You can see that George's comment about me as the entrepreneur is totally appropriate. But until somebody comes along, I'm the guy until that date comes. But if you go to the beetcoin.org site, you will see our new team of Beetcoin advisors. And I'm extremely proud of who they are. I'm not going to say more. You'll just see that it is very diverse. It is international. It has different ages, different sexes. It's not a huge group. It's 8 people. I worked really hard to get the best 8 people that I could get as a holding place for this thing we're trying to do. And at least one of the people I think only one of them is famous enough that you will all know who they are. I'm not going to just go on the site. You'll see who they are. So having said all that, what's his name? George? Who's the person who just made the comment? It's not George. The person who asked about starting the soil group. Where is he?
That's Andrew. Andrew, you're in Southern California, correct? I think you're with us still.
Yeah, anyway, the point is, just send me an email, woody@slowmoney.org. Say you want to start a soil group. We can gab a little bit about it. And I'll try not to lead you down the primrose path. I mean, if I think if it's not going to, there's a certain critical mass. You need 2 or 3 or 4 people who really are committed to get the thing started. To Mark's comment, there's going to be a few years of pure volunteerism, at least a few years. You have to know what you're getting into. On the other hand, it's not rocket science. It just requires some care and some time and some vision. So it's not that complicated. Just take some gumption.
Gumption it is. So we have a question from Shelly asking, has this work been able to bridge any partisan divides? Yeah.
Well, I would say not yet, I guess. So what we are doing, if you say small farms, family farms, local food systems, you tell me if that's a liberal idea or a conservative idea. And the answer is it's both. It's both. Now, it tends to be in today's political environment that most of the people who get into the work are coming from the liberal side of things. But the basic thing we're doing is extremely conservative. We're trying to get off the globalization, over-dependence on global supply chains, over-dependence on industrial food systems, overdependence on, you can fill in the blanks, on commodity agriculture. So that's basically a very conservative thing. But the short answer to the question is not yet, meaning we're still very small little dots of people, and it hasn't really. Inherent in the beauty of the message, though, is that it should be a way to bring people together. And that's certainly the ethos of the book. So the idea of the great American do-over that's referred to in the book is that. It's that all this divisiveness and all of the, if I were trying to like pull that thread out of the book, I'd say that the divisiveness and the fakery and the vilification and all of that stuff comes because we're all disconnected from one another in the places where we live. And so we're relying on highly intermediated pieces of information and distant this and distant the other thing. We don't know where that came from. We don't know who the person, there's no trust, so if you don't have any social fabric, everything falls apart, you get really divisive. So I really do believe that community supported agriculture and local food systems is a profoundly healing thing. And it needs to be held in that space. So it's about a lot more than just the local food. It's about all the other things that come with it. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm taking a quick look to see if we have any other questions before we end our time here together. I did put Woody's email in the chat. Again, please visit beetcoin.org to follow this amazing work. Let's see. Okay, Mark, I see you have another question. Let's go to you really quick before we close out.
Yeah, sorry to take up so much. Just a quick one. I'd like to hear about, since you're looking at a social network, your back-end support for farmers. So let's just take, I'm a farmer and I have a pest I've never dealt with. What can you do? What does this do for me?
Not much.
Okay.
I'm being a little glib when I said, so this is the capital, the intellectual capital, the technical support, the shared risk, everything comes from the same place. Groups of local people working directly with one another. So in that could be technical support of various kinds, depending on who the people are. You can have people in the group who know a lot about finance. You could have nobody in the group who knows anything about finance. You could have someone who's like a retired guy who consults on business startups, who wants to help with a business plan. You could have other farmers, and all of our groups do have other farmers. And so that kind of exchange, the technical direct sharing of knowledge from one farmer to another. Farmers are not all that collaborative in the greater scheme of things. They're very independent. And I'm oversimplifying here, but they're out there every day independently working on their farm. And so historically, farmers were looked at by people who were trying to sell them new things. I'm shifting gears a little bit here, but by companies that were trying to sell them new things, farmers were very averse to change. So, big commercial enterprises evolved to sell farmers new things and get them to try them and get them hooked into the new technologies or whatever. So no, we're at the whole other end of it. It's just people locally helping one another informally. So Slow Money itself, like we as an NGO don't do any of that. Like there's no place to go on the Slow Money website for technical assistance on farming. Of course, we have lots of farmers we know lots of people who are very experienced with the pioneers of organic farming, like Elliot Coleman and Joel Salatin. They were featured in the video because they're friends and they participate in Slow Money events. And we do put on workshops occasionally where we get some of those guys to come and, share their genuine wisdom, which is amazing if you've ever seen their farms. So anybody on this call who isn't like a food and farming person, there are two names, Elliot Coleman, Joel Salatin. There are many others, but no, we don't formally try to provide that, the on-farm technical assistance in any programmatic way through Slow Money.
Okay, and we have one more question, I think, from Christina. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you if that's all right.
Yes, I'm just curious, how do you find the farmers to loan to? And then my other thing is just to kind of clarify, so if you're giving money to the loan fund, that's totally a donation and there's no risk because there's no return on your donation. The only risk is whether the farmer pays back to the fund. Right.
Correct.
So how do you find your farmers, or how do you vet your farmers?
Again, you're going to be bored with the answer.
Mm-hmm.
It is the answer. And you just have to kind of feel yourself into this. This
Mhm.
is all local. Everything is local. So if you cannot form a group of 20 or 30 or 40 people locally or larger, then you don't have a group at all to make a loan. If you do form that group, I'll just go out on a limb and say it's highly likely that at least a few of the people in the group are regulars at the farmers market or belong to a few CSAs. Pretty darn likely. So you begin to have some, and it might be so that half the people in the group shop at the farmers market or belong to a CSA. These early groups are kind of self-selected and they're a little bit more forward leaning, right? So those connections into the farming community, it's all, so, if Soil Boulder has a loan application that a farmer can find online. It's just a few page thing. I'll give you a little nuts and bolts answer. We have 5 people who are on the loan committee. We review the loan applications that come in, and then we decide if we want to invite that farmer to come to one of our meetings to meet our members and present what they're doing. I didn't go into all that detail on how it works. So pre-COVID, the farmers came into a room with 30 or 40 of our 115 members, as long as we had a quorum of 20, and personally presented and had a conversation with our members about what he or she was doing. And then we all voted on whether or not to give them the loan. They would go for a walk. We would have a conversation and a vote, and they would come back. That's what it sounds like in abstract. In reality, it's us inviting people to come present. We do get a few random things over the transom, but it's really the group of people knowing what's going on in their food community, poking around saying, hey, we have some money to loan with the farmers market. We know most of the people that we're lending to are only 1 degree of separation away from them. And that's why it works, because there's a lot of social capital in there. It's not an abstraction. It's not like just, sending a form in online, you don't know where it's going. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much.
Yep.
All right, last call. Any other questions? That was amazing, Woody. Thank you so much for being with us here today. And again, if folks have any other follow-up questions, it sounds like Woody is ready to connect with you all. And please do visit beatcoin.org and check out the book AHA for some inspiration and guidance. Yes.
All right. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Peace.
Thank you.
See you.
Peace.
Okay.